All right. Hey, good morning, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Monday, October 7th, 2024. This is your morning update on Hurricane Milton. This will be the first of two videos this morning. This video will be a general storm update. We're going to be talking about intensity, track, things like that, looking at computer models and satellite presentation, giving you a regional update on the storm. Our second video will be more on impact, storm surge, rain, wind, those kind of things. We'll be talking about Northeast Florida, Tampa, and the rest of Florida the best we can with the time we have. I cannot answer every single person's question at every zip code, but I will do my best to give you a general idea of what to expect in the areas that we're talking about and hopefully give you enough info to make a decision on that. Unfortunately, guys, there is absolutely no good news this morning. As of the hitting record on this video just a minute ago, the Hurricane Center has upgraded Milton to a Category 5 hurricane. Maximum sustained winds are 160 miles per hour. Milton is about 100 miles or so from the northern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula. It is a very compact but very powerful hurricane that has rapidly intensified all night, and the pressure has fallen at a rate that we have only really ever seen, maybe with Hurricane Wilma and Hurricane Felix, about the only two storms that have intensified at this rate. Now, again, Milton's a very tiny hurricane. The hurricane force winds only go about 20, 30 miles out, but it is a dramatically intense hurricane in the center of that storm. National Hurricane Center morning update. This just came out a couple minutes before recording. Hurricane Hunter aircraft are in there. And again, estimated winds are now 160 miles an hour. That central pressure down to 925 millibars. The latest graphic from the Hurricane Center this morning. Again, this was the 10 a.m. advisory, so it shows 155, but again, it is a Category 5. Movement east-southeast at 9 miles per hour. And Milton, again, is expected to move very close to the Yucatan Peninsula over the next day or two, and then begin to turn northward on Tuesday, and then move towards Florida with some kind of bend back to the east as it crosses the state of Florida. But exactly this trajectory is a bit questionable. We're going to talk about why. But just for a quick reference, hurricane watches are in effect from most of the west coast of Florida, from south of Fort Myers to just north of Cedar Key. Includes Tampa, includes Lake Okeechobee, and this spreads through most of central Florida as well. Only really Jacksonville and the Panhandle, and then some of like Miami and West Palm are out of the hurricane watches right now. But those will be tropical storm watches for most folks as the days go on. And again, this video will mostly just be talking about the actual storm itself. So this is the latest from the the Hurricane Hunter Recon aircraft. This is an Air Force Reserve plane. The last pass from the SFMR microwave radiometer showed the flight level, the surface winds to be in the 170s, which probably corrected down, is about 160 miles per hour, and that central pressure down into the middle 920s. Very powerful. But again, notice how sharp these lines are, how fast the lines come up and then go back down and then go back up. So again, if you saw like the lines go up slowly and then peak at that high, you would see a much bigger wind field. But the wind field is very small with Milton. But again, very strong. Satellite presentation of exactly what you would expect to see in a rapidly intensifying major hurricane. That pinhole eye is cleared out in the last few frames and is surrounded by a perfectly symmetrical central dense overcast. Very strong gravity waves emitting from the storm. It is a pretty much a monster at this hour, and a very compact buzzsaw moving through the Gulf of Mexico in what is a perfect environment of warm air, or warm water, light wind, shear aloft, and all those things. Going into the future, there's going to be a couple things with Milton we got to watch. So basically, going back to the Hurricane Center's forecast, we don't anticipate any weakening until at least early on Wednesday. The storm will fluctuate because we will have in the short term eye wall replacement cycles. We can almost already see that. I saw a shot of the Mexican radar. I don't have this up. But if we look at the Hurricane Hunter Recon, there is some note that there is a secondary wind maximum starting to form on some of these graphs. Notice how in the first eye wall pass, there was a nice smooth curve up, but in this one, there's more of a bump on the curve, and then it goes up. This is a secondary eye wall probably starting to form. You can see the little temperature spike, and everything kind of indicates that there might be a secondary outer eye wall forming, which would not be surprising. A very compact, powerful hurricane like Milton will undergo eye wall replacements, which is basically when the eye gets too compact to keep its angular momentum conserved, and which is basically physics for it's trying to turn the winds too sharply, and then eventually that inner eye wall will fall out and an outer eye wall will take over. What this process means is that the hurricane will increase in size. but decrease in maximum wind speeds for a period of time. So Milton is likely about to start one, I would guess, just judging by the satellite presentation and what we've seen so far this morning. But the general rub is that it's not going to weaken much over the next day or so. Besides maybe brushing up against the Yucatan and the eyeball replacements, it's going to be a Category 4 or 5 hurricane for the next about 24 to 36 hours. Now, we go into Wednesday morning. This is where it changes. Now, what's interesting is our hurricane models, as bullish as they've been with this, we're all undershooting Milton, like wildly undershooting Milton. This is the H-WRF, and I'll take you back to 15Z on Monday, which is 10 a.m. The H-WRF thought this would be at 961. I'll even give it a couple hours ahead. I'll give it 1 o'clock in the afternoon, or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 956. It's currently in the 920s. These models are 30 to 40 millibars off right now. So the intensity is far ahead of what these models had. Even these hurricane models are having a hard time resolving how strong and how small Milton is right now. But as we go in the next couple of days, it shows more intensification. And then eventually on Wednesday, 2 things happen. Number one, notice how that tropical storm, the outer wind rings start expanding. This is going into Wednesday. The winds get larger, and then the pressure starts rising as the storm makes it to Florida. What we anticipate is as this moves towards Florida on Wednesday, we do think that a combination of dry air and wind shear will begin to weaken the storm. This is the GFS upper air sounding showing that a much stronger westerly wind shear should pick up about 25 to 35, even 45 or so knots. And the upper levels begin to dry out quite a bit. So the combination of dry air and wind shear will likely begin to weaken Milton. The question is, how strong is Milton when it shows up? How big is Milton when it shows up? And is it going to show up too late for that wind shear and dry air to do a whole lot to it? The trends have been a little bit slower, which is a bit of good news, that it won't come in faster, but may not be enough to really weaken this all that much. And Milton is still forecast to be a powerful, probably Category 3 or 4 hurricane as it's approaching the coast of Florida on Wednesday night. HFAS shows this as well, showing coming in at Category probably 4 or 5 intensity, but then weakening some as it moves in right along Tampa Bay and then weakens from there. The models are not showing as much of a dramatic expansion of the wind field, but it's still going to be quite a bit. So again, Milton's reach will go well into northern Florida, and then far south is probably Lake Okeechobee in terms of the stronger winds, and then tropical storm force, like fringe winds will be more for like Miami and stuff, which we'll get more into that in the impacts video. H1 probably showing this the best as far as that wind field expansion goes and coming in a little bit further north to Tampa Bay. All this is because as the storm is moving up towards Florida, you have this trough coming down across the southeast, across Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, and this is going to start lifting the storm northward and start greatly increasing the wind shear the storm feels, along with the drier air that's been lurking in the vicinity. You can see this on water vapor, a lot of dry air from the cold front sitting along the Gulf Coast today. That will eventually start to work into the storm as that trough moves in. So the question really is going to be the timing of, does that trough get there in time to start pushing dry air into the back of the storm, or does it not? See the dry air starting to work in on the GFS as it makes landfall. That's going to be the important test. The other thing is going to be where exactly this comes in. Some models have been pushing this in a little bit south of Tampa and riding just along Melbourne and moving off. But some of the more recent runs are pulling up more of this southwest and northeast trajectory, which puns it in more around Tampa Bay, and then kind of brings it in more towards northern Florida, and then turns out, which would dramatically increase the impacts from northern Florida and even parts of southeast Georgia as it does so. This is the latest GFS run showing that to some degree, but then the GFS kind of shows it lift up. See that kind of like real sharp north to south to north kind of move, and then it kind of moves more eastward as the trough starts capturing it. So how close this exactly gets to northern Florida is going to be a big question too. But again, also that trajectory of impact on Tampa Bay, guys. I mean, if this holds, if this is the track, if it comes in just north of Tampa Bay, I could not physically draw a worse track. This is, if someone told me, hey, you are a deity right now and you have weather powers and you can make the worst hurricane to impact Tampa Bay, how would you do it? You can't make it any worse than this. So something I'm going to say in the next video too, but just know that the west coast of Florida, the threat is so real today. So that's kind of like the latest storm update. The hurricane the models are showing this again, moving right across there. kind of what we've been seeing. Super Ensemble here on Tomer Berg's website showing the same thing, but notice this big ellipse kind of off to the east and to the west and showing that large spread in timing. It means our models are mostly agreeing that the track is somewhere from about like Cape Coral to just north of Tampa, but the timing could be quite hard to pin down. So that's something we'll have to refine over the next day or two. So changes on that. And then again, the potential here for a high-end Category 5 hurricane remains on the table, and the maximum potential intensity of this thing shows this thing could push up towards 180 or 190 miles per hour before it hits its ceiling. So that's what I got for you guys today in your update on the storm. We're going to have a second update video recording momentarily about the impacts and what I can kind of discern right now. That'll be up as soon as I have it. So until then, guys, thanks for watching and have a good one.